This is Shin, an ordinary high school student. Nothing remarkable, nothing attention-grabbing. But on the other hand, he's utterly obsessed with magical stones and loves them deeply. One day we find him inside a shop for ancient stones, asking the shopkeeper if there's anything new or unique available. The man shows him a collection of stones beyond imagination, and Shin is left absolutely mesmerized. Suddenly, Shin remembers he has class, so he dashes out of the shop, promising the owner that he'll come back later. He gets through his school day just fine, and later that evening, he sits down with his mother. From their conversation, we learn that she is a renowned archaeologist with a massive collection of books in the field. She tells him, "Today is your father's birthday, but like every year, I'll celebrate it alone because all he does is drown himself in work." Shin is deeply moved by her words and promises her that this year, he'll bring his father to celebrate with them. He begins sending a flood of messages to his father, insisting that he come to the celebration, and even threatening that if he doesn't, he'll go to his workplace and bring him back by force, whether he likes it or not. That night, they prepare an amazing birthday party and wait for his father's arrival. But contrary to their hopes, Shin's father doesn't answer any of the calls. As always, he's deeply immersed in his scientific research. That's when Shin decides, enough is enough. He takes the first train to his father's workplace. When he arrives, he tells the guards, "I'm Shin Sanga, here for a personal visit to the director." He takes the elevator to his father's office, but finds no one there. Suddenly, his eyes catch sight of a magical stone, glowing and clearly beyond its dormant phase. He runs toward it to grab it, and in that very moment, a massive burst of energy explodes throughout the room, shifting the entire reality around him. In an instant, the stone pulls Shin into another world, a world he doesn't recognize, a world that makes no sense to him. Meanwhile, in that same world, we shift to a mysterious man wielding a terrifying dagger, silently infiltrating the royal castle. He swiftly eliminates 2 guards, then steps into the king's chambers, clearly intent on assassination. The king lies asleep, unaware of what's happening. The man raises his blade, ready to strike, but suddenly the king opens his eyes, blocks the attack in an instant, and sends the man flying back. The king speaks. It is not manly to kill someone in his sleep. Everything flips upside down. We discover that the attacker is Arslan, the son of the former king, here to exact vengeance on the man who betrayed his father and stole the throne. But do you really think it's going to be that easy, my friend? No way. In a flash, both of them summon their magical weapons, and an epic battle erupts, blows flying from the left, the right, above, and below. Arslan gathers all his power and strikes at the king, but it's no use. The king blocks it effortlessly and sends him crashing to the ground. Just as he's about to deal a killing blow, he instead wounds Arslan in the side, then commands the soldiers to imprison him. We then shift to the past, learning that Arslan once lived peacefully in the royal palace, until one day he overheard the servants talking about how the current king had murdered his family and usurped the throne. From that moment forward, Arslan swore to reclaim his father's right and restore the throne, no matter the cost. Back to the present. Suddenly, a portal of energy opens in the prison courtyard, and in a flash, Shin emerges from it. Everyone is stunned. No one understands what's happening. Are you human or spirit? How did you get here? Before Shin can even open his mouth, the soldiers charge at him. They decide to imprison him too. But do you think it'll be that easy? Say it with me. No way. Suddenly, a deadly magical energy erupts from within Shin, and Arslan shouts, "Attack them now." With a single strike, Shin wipes out the soldiers and obliterates the entire area. Arslan looks at him, stunned. "What are you waiting for? Let's get out of here." Quickly, as they flee the castle, Arslan tells Shin to hide his weapon and follow quietly. But Shin is confused. "How am I supposed to hide a weapon I don't even know how I got?" Arslan replies, "It's easy. Take a deep breath, think of something you love, and the weapon will disappear." And just like that, the weapon vanishes. Shin realizes that Arslan knows the layout of the castle intimately. He's even built secret tunnels that no one else knows about. When they finally escape into the forest, a massive monster suddenly attacks. Shin freezes in fear. Arslan summons his weapon and lunges at the beast, landing a solid hit. But the fight is intense, and he calls out for Shin to help. Shin, however, still doesn't even know how he summoned his weapon in the first place. The beast lunges at Shin, lifts him into the air. He's about to be finished, but suddenly, the weapon returns. Shin channels all his power and strikes back. The monster, furious, summons its own weapon, and with a single blow, sends both of them flying off a cliff, crashing beside a raging river. Arslan dives in to save Shin from drowning, making sure he's still alive. Shin yells, "What just happened? Why did I follow you? Who even are you? And why does everyone want to kill you?" Arslan finally begins to explain. He tells Shin that this world is called Andorra Kingdom, a mythical realm, something like Atlantis, my friend. As they speak, Shin opens his eyes again, utterly overwhelmed by the beauty of the place. Arslan tells him to stay calm. Then suddenly, a girl appears. Her name is Lisa, and she calls Arslan, "Your Highness," leaving Shin completely shocked. "A prince? But you were just in prison. What is going on?" Arslan brushes off the question and tells him to keep walking. Eventually, they arrive at one of the most beautiful villages in the kingdom, where a majestic bird flies above. Lisa explains that the bird's name is Flaren, and that it's her closest friend. She's stunned to learn that Shin is from another world. The astonishment is written all over her face, but Arslan interrupts them urgently. "We need to find a place to hide, fast." He leads them to an important figure in the kingdom, Pascal, a genius, and the man who has been Arslan's mentor since childhood. But before they can even catch their breath, a massive wild boar charges at them. Without hesitation, Arslan summons his weapon again, and Lisa calls on Flaren, who transforms into a giant dragon. In an instant, the dragon snatches the boar and finishes it off. But another boar appears, this time charging straight at Shin. But who's he messing with now? Shin is no longer the same. He summons his weapon and with a single blow knocks the monster flat and takes it down for good. Suddenly, Shin and Lisa stop in their tracks, halted by one of the traps laid in the area. Fortunately, Pascal arrives just in time and rescues them. We learn that he had planted numerous traps to protect himself from monsters, acting as if he were from another world. He takes them to his home, but the place is in complete chaos, with nothing suitable to sit on. No matter. Pascal begins questioning Shin. Is he truly from another world? And how did he end up here? Shin replies, "It's very simple. I was with my father in the laboratory, and the moment I touched a strange crystal, I was pulled into it. I found myself in this forest. Yes, and Arslan is my friend." Pascal shows him a map of the other world and says, "We are here exactly. Long ago it was said that a city called Balon held a temporal gate that allowed travel between Andorra and your world, but it was destroyed by one of the ancients, severing the connection between the realms. We then discover that the new king is doing everything in his power to reopen that gate, as he desires access to Shin's world." The story flashes back to the past, revealing that Pascal was once a research scholar in the royal palace. He had indeed discovered a method to reactivate the gate, but, fearing the king's intentions toward the new world, he hid his research and fled. In another scene, the king commands his soldiers to find Arslan and bring him immediately. They unleash vicious monsters and succeed in locating them. The soldiers almost capture them, but just then, the alarm bells ring at Pascal's house. An overwhelming number of soldiers begin their assault. Arslan wants to fight, but Pascal stops him saying, "We must escape immediately. If the king's men capture us, we won't be able to do anything." At that moment, the traps are triggered, capturing and destroying the soldiers one by one. Pascal grabs his flying machine and escapes swiftly. After several loops in the air, he shouts, "Hold on to something." Then he crashes violently and says, "That was the best landing I've ever made." "Yes, you heard me right, my friend." He takes them to a secret hideout. From the outside, it looks abandoned and filled with bats. But inside, it's a fully equipped laboratory. Later, Pascal and Arslan move aside to talk privately. Pascal says, "We must find a way to return Shin to his world, and at the same time, prevent any connection to the other world. Ancient legends warned against this." He adds, "But how can we do that while the king himself is trying to open the gate? You're now a wanted man and I'm in hiding. Our only option is to reach Balon, open the gate in secret, and once Shin returns to his world, we destroy the place entirely." They agree to the plan. Meanwhile, the king sends out mercenary beasts, planning to use them to eliminate Arslan and Pascal. He says to them, "I want them kneeling before me, alive. No one kills them but me. Understood?" Elsewhere, Pascal disguises himself and goes out to buy food and other necessities, asking everyone else to stay put. Lisa also leaves to fetch water. Arslan seizes the opportunity to speak to Shin. "I have a plan to get you back to your world," he says. "But in return, you must help me eliminate the king." Shin responds in anger, "I would never do that." Arslan explains that if the king reaches Balon before they do, Shin will never be able to return. Therefore, they must get rid of the king first. He adds, we must keep Lisa out of this conversation. Her knowing could lead us to disaster. Later, they head out to hunt wild boars. Each of them summons their magical weapon. Arslan says to Shin, you'll lure the boar toward me, and I'll finish it off. As planned, Shin drives the boar toward Arslan, who charges at it but trips and falls. The boar nearly finishes him, but do you think Shin would just stand by? Of course not. Suddenly, Shin leaps into the air and takes down the boar in the blink of an eye. A truly epic scene. At night, they sleep peacefully until Arslan wakes up suddenly and rouses Shin. They rush toward the royal palace, only to find it surrounded by the king's soldiers. Shin and Arslan's group is cornered, seemingly facing death, until it is revealed that these soldiers do not belong to the king. They are part of the forbidden territory of Agnist, a faction of rebels. Arslan asks to speak to their leader and a man appears saying, what do you want? I'm the commander. His name is Dimitro. Arslan boldly says, I want to cooperate with you to bring down the king. Dimitro scoffs. And who kills his own father? Everyone believes Arslan is the current king's son, unaware that the king killed his own father and seized the throne. Arslan explains that he knows the rebels have no allegiance, like the Zhou tribe, who operate as special forces. But the moment he mentions the Zhou tribe, the rebels shout, he compares us to the Zhou? Let's get him. Arslan tries to prove his worth, even revealing critical information about the king, but a girl among them says, save your breath. You and your friends are useless. Dimitro, however, thinks otherwise. He asks, if you manage to get rid of the king, what would you do afterward? Arslan falls silent, then replies, I don't care what happens after as long as he's gone. Dimitro laughs, so you're not only weak, you're foolish too. Get out of here before I kill you myself. Arslan and Shin burn with rage and prepare to summon their magical weapons and attack. But it's useless. Dimitro knocks one down and lifts the other by his feet. He looks at Arslan and says, you're pathetic and ignorant. All you care about is dethroning the king, forgetting that if you kill him, you'll have to rule the kingdom. Then he adds, I'll give you a chance to prove you're worthy of leading the kingdom, but first, you'll join my team. He continues, you will follow my orders to the letter. First, you work. There's no room for slackers in my team. He takes them to the village and gives them their first task, washing clothes in the river. Come on, energetic one, show us what you've got. Dimitro joins them in washing, telling Arslan, being a leader doesn't make you better than anyone else. There's no difference between a prince and a pauper, we're all equal. He then turns to Shin and says, you seem to have adapted quickly to life here. Shin replies, and how did you know I'm from another world? Dimitro answers, I just found out now, you fool. Unexpectedly, he shows no shock or surprise. That night, we see Shin looking relaxed, standing in his freshly washed clothes, like a perfect housewife. Never mind. Arslan wants to share a new plan, but before he can say anything, Shin interrupts him. If you mention your father again, I'll finish you off. Today we wash clothes. Who knows what we'll do tomorrow? The two begin bickering about what Dimitro put them through. Then, suddenly they each summon their weapon, throw it to the ground, and charge at one another chaotically. Punches fly left and right, and it seems like the end. The battle between them continues until they both collapse from exhaustion. Then we see that Dimitro and the rest of the team had been watching the entire time from above, letting them settle things their own way. On the other side, we shift to Pascal, who had once again returned to the secret laboratory to inquire about Arslan and Shin. The girl responds that when she regained consciousness, neither of them was there. Pascal is stunned and says they must have gone to pursue the king, growing deeply concerned and deciding to search for them immediately. We then return to Shin and Arslan, just as Dimitro begins to regain consciousness. He tells them, get up, we have much work to do. They promptly gather for a meeting, where Dimitro shares his view that the idea of a coup and surrounding the king is impossible, as the king has many allies, especially the cities surrounding the castle. However, he adds that if they head north of the kingdom, they might find people willing to join their cause. At that moment, Arslan objects, saying, a coup? The royal guard alone exceeds 80,000 soldiers, but Dimitro insists on contacting the Zhou tribe and attempting to recruit them. Arslan erupts, exclaiming, what nonsense is this? More than half the Zhou tribe are already allied with the king. They're even considered part of the kingdom's special forces. Shin adds that he had previously fought one of their warriors, and that man was nothing short of a murderous beast in every sense of the word. In contrast, Dimitro tells them that the Zhou tribe had long suffered brutal mistreatment at the hands of the kingdom's monarchs, and that he has a plan to reach out to them. He then looks toward the girl, Louise, and asks her to prepare, as she will be in charge of this negotiation mission. Afterward, we see Louise tending to Arslan and Shin's wounds. She begins to share important information about this world, explaining that it contains two types of beings, the Andras, who are humans, and the Ando, from whom the Zu tribe descends. She adds that the two lived in complete peace until the humans began to persecute them, and some kings even enslaved them by force. She also reveals that she herself is half human and half Ando. She then shares a great secret, that Dimitro once had a friend from the Zu tribe. We are taken into a flashback where we see Dimitro walking through the forest before suddenly being attacked in a savage ambush. He barely survives by chance, loses his way, and is overwhelmed by fear until a young man named Louis appears before him. Dimitro tries to offer him everything he has in exchange for safe passage, but Louis calms him and takes him along. Over time, a strong bond forms between them, and they become close friends. One day, as they are walking through one of the kingdom's streets, Dimitro sees a man viciously beating an Ando tribesman. He steps in, but the man attacks him instead. At that moment, Louis intervenes to protect him, fighting valiantly. Suddenly, a group of people launches an ambush and a fierce battle ensues. Tragically, Louis suffers fatal wounds and dies. Dimitro is left in shock and profound grief over the loss of his friend. We return to Shin, who goes to visit a team member named Aljo, a young man with the mysterious ability to foresee events, but only when he loses consciousness first. Shin asks him whether he will ever return to his original world, and Aljo replies that he still does not know, but Shin surprises him, saying that he sensed an energy that appeared and disappeared in the same instant, right here in this place. Aljo goes to investigate, only to realize that Shin had set a trap to knock him out and force him into a vision. However, the plan fails. Aljo then tells him that he had a vision nonetheless. If he ever sees the blue andro bird, only then will he be able to return to his world. Shin is overjoyed and sets off to find the bird, but he falls into another trap, this time set by Aljo. It turns out there is no such bird, and Aljo simply wanted to take revenge. It becomes clear that Aljo is not an easy person to deal with either. Elsewhere, we see the Beast Squad in the forest, having discovered that Shin and Arslan are in the area. While Shin is wandering, a beast ambushes him from behind, saying, "Want a final wish before you die?" The beast attacks clumsily, and Shin struggles to block the blows. Boom! The beast kicks him hard, sending him crashing to the ground, nearly killing him, until Arslan appears at the last second and blocks the assault, saving Shin. The beast says, "The king wants you alive, Arslan, but I can always tell him you died by accident." Enraged, Shin charges at him with all his might, but the beast throws him into the trees and strikes back. Suddenly, an immense power erupts from Shin's weapon. Yes, the weapon has evolved, and the greatness has reached its peak. Shin and Arslan unite, delivering a devastating blow that knocks the beast down, but it manages to flee before being turned into shawarma. We then move to the rest of the Beast Squad, where a bloody battle unfolds against the rebels. But the surprise? Dimitro fights like a dragon. He charges at the Beast Commander, shouting, "Your end has come, you dog of the king!" A brutal clash breaks out, and suddenly, a massive energy explosion engulfs the entire area. Everyone freezes in place. No one knows what's happening. They believe the place is collapsing, and are forced to flee immediately. As Shin and Arslan emerge from the forest, they find Pascal and Licia waiting for them. It turns out Pascal was the one behind the explosion. It was his plan all along, after learning of the king's soldiers attacking them. Genius. Suddenly, Dimitro and the rest of the team arrive. When he learns that Pascal used to work with the king, Dimitro becomes furious and leaves. That evening, Pascal sits with Arslan and says, "Where are you headed, my boy? Joining a bunch of rebels to destroy the kingdom? I heard you tried to kill your father. That's why he threw you in prison." Arslan, angered, replies, "Don't call him my father." Pascal responds, "Even if he's not your real father, don't forget he raised you, gave you everything, and never neglected you." Arslan says, "I must avenge my real father. He killed him and stole the throne." Pascal then says, "But do you even know the reason? Or are you just following your emotions? Listen, my boy, I won't stand in your way, but before you make any decisions, you must find the reason and the evidence. And before you walk the path of vengeance, seek the truth first." In another place, we see Shin roaming the city in search of Dimitro. He asks a chubby man, "Have you seen a tall idiot wearing a hat with a feather at the front?" Suddenly, Dimitro appears before him. They head inside, and Shin tells him he plans to go to the city of Babylon to carry out something important. Demetro responds, "I have nothing to do with your problems. You're all from one world. Kill each other or make peace. It doesn't concern me." However, he informs him that the king is currently en route to Babylon. Demetro pulls out a map and decides to head there himself. Shin realizes the journey is fraught with danger and that death could await at any moment, but this remains their only chance to bring down the king. His defenses will be weak at that time, making him easier to eliminate. We find Demetro seated with a number of his allies. It is revealed that he hails from the north of the kingdom, and that he has many followers who are merely waiting for his signal to launch an immediate coup. However, Demetro tells them that he must negotiate with the king before making any such move. Yet Arslan holds a different view. He believes that the king would never allow anyone to negotiate with him, and that he must be eliminated by his own hand. After some time, their sea journey comes to an end, and in order to continue the rest of the way, they take a mountainous path. Suddenly, a massive storm strikes, forcing them to camp inside a nearby cave. There, Shin seizes the opportunity to ask Arslan why he seeks to kill his own father. Arslan then reveals the truth. The king is not his real father. He is merely the man who killed Arslan's father to seize the throne. Nothing more. Shin is deeply shaken by this confession. The next day, the weather clears and they resume their journey. Shin seems overjoyed by the snow covering the mountain. He throws himself onto the ground like a child, but as he gets up, everyone is stunned to see the footprints of a giant dragon. Shin is struck with terror and exclaims, "Just what we needed! Let's finish this quickly and get out of here." But the moment he takes a step forward, the ground collapses beneath him, and he falls into an underground ice cave. The rest of the group rushes down after him to ensure he is unharmed. Feline, using his ability to track people's energy, heads directly toward Shin, only to return in an instant. "What happened?" "Yes, my friend, it is a dragon, one so colossal that it dwarfs any other dragon you could possibly imagine. It appears that the end is near." Shin and Arslan ready their weapons, but it's no use. The father of dragons assaults them with a devastating ice storm, turning everything to ash. Demetro realizes they must find Aljo, for he alone holds the power to save them in such a dire situation. They begin moving toward him, but are suddenly surrounded by another dragon. Is this the end? Not quite. Out of nowhere, flames begin to swirl around Feline, and it becomes clear that he is not just any dragon. He is the king of dragons himself. Feline recklessly attacks some of them, prompting the other dragons to strike at Arslan and Lycia. As always, Feline intervenes, colliding with them to shield his companions. But it doesn't end there. He transforms into a transcendent, unimaginable form and subdues the opposing dragon, forcing it to yield to him before returning to his natural state. Elsewhere, Knowledge arrives at the scene. It's revealed that he possesses a unique ability to control other dragons. He informs them that this is an entire dragon family, and they mistakenly believe the group had come to hunt them, hence their aggression. No matter. After this, Demetro leads the group onward. We learn that they still have a long journey ahead before reaching the nearest city. Suddenly, the dragon family appears again, and what a means of transportation. It's perfect. Before long, they arrive at a spot close to the city. As soon as they do, the dragons turn back, unwilling to stray far from their homeland. It's then revealed that they are now only a few miles away from Babylon City. Shin asks, "What would happen if the king reaches the city before we do? That could destroy any chance I have of returning to Earth." Arslan responds, "If that happens, we must stop him by force. It will be a battle of life or death." Suddenly, Aljo suffers a heart attack and collapses. When he regains consciousness, he finds everyone gathered around him. He tells them he has seen visions of the future, and they are filled with destruction. He reveals that the energy keeping Andra alive is about to run out, or more precisely, the end is near. We then shift to the king, who is seen standing with one of his scientists. The scientist tells him he has a way to reclaim Babylon City and restore the time gate located there. When the king asks why he would want to reopen the gate, he suddenly loses control and yells, "One more word and I'll tear your head from your shoulders, you fool." At that moment, the mercenary squad arrives before the king and informs him that the rebels have succeeded in forming an alliance with the Zhou tribe and that they now know everything. The king turns to the beast standing beside him, his name is Ebel, and asks, "Who gave you those scars?" Then he shouts at him for disobeying orders. "Your job is to observe and report to me. If you ever act on your own again, I'll separate your head from your body." Understood? Afterward, the mercenaries leave the kingdom's camp, but suddenly the commander's bird returns to them with a new message. Pay close attention to this scene, my friend, for we'll be needing it later. We return to Shin and Arslan, who are talking before sleep. Shin seems deeply sorrowful over his mother, but Arslan reassures him, saying, "You are not part of our conflicts, and believe me, my friend, I will never abandon you. I'll get you back to your homeland safely." The next morning, when Shin wakes up, he finds Arslan and Dimitro standing with one of their allies. He learns that the majority of city rulers and tribal chiefs have now joined them, and that they've successfully formed a massive human alliance, with allies across every region. Dimitro was overwhelmed with joy, barely able to believe they had reached this stage. Meanwhile, on the other side, Louise stood beside a strange-looking bird, the very same bird that served as the commander of the mercenary squad. Could this mean that Louise was a traitor? A short while later, Shin, Lisa, and Arslan were gathered together, joy lighting up their faces, for their number of allies was growing with each passing day. Shin turned to Arslan and said, "There is no other way to reclaim your right than by killing the king." Arslan, enraged, shouted back, "If there's one reason I still draw breath, it is to kill the king and reclaim my father's right." To which Shin replied, "Then tell me, do you even know why your father was killed? Or do you simply seek vengeance for the sake of vengeance?" Arslan, furious, retorted, "Do not overstep your bounds. You are but an outsider. In mere moments, you'll return to your world, and I'll finally rid myself of your father's shadow forever." Upon hearing this, Shin's anger flared. He landed a punch that threw Arslan to the ground, then said, "Do you know what it means to kill a king? It means entering a battle of life and death, and it is only that which I fear for you, fool." Then he turned and walked away. We then shift to Pascal, who was flipping through an old book in search of information about the city of Babylon. Suddenly, his assistant entered with alarming news. The life energy in Andor was dropping at an unnatural rate, threatening to bring ruin to the entire city. Pascal immediately reviewed his research and said to his assistant, "Something strange is happening. Yes, it's exactly like what occurred when the king seized the throne of Andor. There's no doubt the king has a hand in this." He decided at once to head for Babylon, though the distance between him and the city was immense. But his assistant surprised him, revealing that, thanks to his genius, he had built a private aircraft just for him. Pascal was overjoyed and they prepared to depart for Babylon immediately. Meanwhile, the rebels' team had finally reached the outskirts of Babylon, the city now visible just beyond the horizon. As they approached the city's entrance, Alja produced an ancient map and told them that one of the old towers served as the city's main entrance. Using his gift of foresight, he pointed to the correct tower. Upon entering, they found the passage blocked, but Arslan pulled on a particular stone, which opened a hidden gate. They descended, and Dimitro asked Mish to scout ahead and make sure the path was safe, which she did. As soon as they entered, Felix noticed footprints, a clear sign that they had arrived too late. Still, they pressed forward and began scaling the barrier before them, for it was the only path inward. Suddenly, Arslan's foot slipped, and he nearly fell from the ledge, had it not been for Shin, who caught him at the very last moment. Just as they had climbed the walls, they now had to descend them again. At this point, Dimitro spoke to Arslan. "We did not come here to kill the king. We want him to abdicate the throne, that's all. Our goal is to end the oppression, nothing more." Arslan, his voice burning, replied, "Have you ever felt the loss of a father before even meeting him? That man is no father of mine. He is the killer of my father, and the thief of his throne. He twisted everything to serve his own gain." Dimitro responded, "Bloodshed was never the answer, but more importantly, do not strike until I've spoken with the king." They rejoined the group and continued their path until they reached the gates of Babylon. Arslan sprinted toward the gate with all his might when suddenly he was struck by a powerful attack that nearly ended him. Yes, the mercenary squad was there, waiting for them, one step ahead. Battle erupted between the two teams, commander against commander. Albeit sought revenge on both Arslan and Shin. Felix took on the beast, launching himself at it with full force until he finally brought it down. Mashi, facing off against the mechanical beast, leapt into the air and landed a crushing blow that destroyed it instantly. One by one, the mercenaries fell, including their commander. Albeit, however, attacked Arslan and Shin together, determined to kill them. But suddenly, Arslan's weapon reached its full potential. His power surged. As Albeit charged again, Alya stepped in, saying, "Leave this creature to me. I know exactly what to do." Arslan replied, "We have no time." He dashed toward Babylon's gate, and the moment his hand touched the wall, the gate opened. Arslan, Shin, and Lisa entered together. Shin tried to stop Arslan from seeking revenge. "Try speaking to the king first. Don't be reckless." But Arslan responded with a punch that knocked him to the ground and continued forward, rage filling his heart. At that very moment, the king had begun preparing to activate the portal to the other world. Suddenly, he heard Arslan's voice call out to him. Yes, the moment of vengeance was within reach. We returned to Alja, who cast his magical barrier against Albeda, but the barrier shattered completely. Then, Louise revealed her true identity, declaring that she cared not for the king nor the rebels, only for money. Dimitro surprised her with a smile and said, "I knew from the beginning that you were a traitor, but I chose to enjoy myself a little. You know, I live for the thrill of adventure." She attacked him wildly, but he parried her blows effortlessly. He was the dragon, and with 2 strikes, one to the left and one to the right, Louise was lost in confusion, unable to counter him. Meanwhile, Felix and Mashi were assaulting Albeda, striking him repeatedly, nearly finishing him off, until he suddenly vanished. We return once more to Dimitro and Louise, who launched herself at him with all her might, screaming, "If you knew I was a traitor from the start, why didn't you finish me? Why did you let me stay all this time?" She slammed him to the ground and demanded, "Show me what you've got." He replied calmly, "I know you were selling our secrets for money, to help your family, but if you think everything between us was an act, I know it wasn't." His words struck her deeply, and she said, "Even if you forgive me, I will never forgive myself. Before I joined you, I was in a mercenary squad. No, I was its commander." Suddenly, rage overtook her again and she lunged at Dimitro, but this time he didn't move, and neither did Louise. Then she began to cry. Dimitro said gently, "If you've given up on yourself, then I never will." Alia stepped in and handed her a handkerchief. His part was done. Someone nearby remarked, "Well done, old man. We don't know how we'd have made it without you." Thus, Dimitro managed to calm Louise and bring her back to their side once more. As for Felix and Mashi, they pinned down Albeda, beating him until he was on the brink of death, and then, just like before, he vanished. At last we arrive at Arslan, who now stood face to face with the king. He summoned his weapon and lunged with full force, shouting, "I will avenge you, father. I will avenge the theft of your throne." But the king pushed him back and responded coldly, "I have no idea what you're talking about. I did no such thing." Suddenly, the portal to Earth activated, and a surge of immense energy flooded every corner of the room. And here, Shin arrives at the scene and joins the battle, standing before Arslan and wondering aloud, is he truly the king's son, or merely adopted? The king firmly replies, "Arslan is my son, and he is not related to anyone else." As soon as the king conceals his magical weapon, Al-Baid suddenly appears and charges at Arslan recklessly, knocking him to the ground. He attacks again, and it seems his end is near, but the king sacrifices himself at the last moment, transporting Arslan away to safety. Yes, the king has been killed, the pens have been lifted and the pages have dried. The gate becomes fully activated, and Shin and Arslan strike at Al-Baid, but the latter evades the attack and immediately escapes to the realm of Earth. My God, what exactly is happening? I can no longer understand a thing. The gate's energy changes entirely, and Al-Baid disappears completely from the scene. The gate then closes and everything returns to how it was. Everyone gathers and Pascal arrives at the site. The king draws his final breaths and says to Arslan, "Now, I can leave Andorra to you without worry." Then he passes away in total peace as Arslan weeps bitterly over his loss. But was that truly his real father or not? And did Al-Baid truly escape to the Earth realm, or was he erased from existence altogether? However, the news of the king's death is certain to turn the kingdom upside down. What events lie ahead? Will Arslan and Shin remain silent about what occurred? Certainly not. The tale is far from over, for behind the tale lies another tale. After the king's death, Dimitro realizes that the revolution has already come to an end. He tells the team, "We must take control of the situation before chaos spreads across the kingdom." As for Arslan, he withdraws from the world, drowning in his thoughts about what had happened, and the extent of the king's sacrifice for him, even though Arslan had come initially to destroy him. At that moment, Shin comes to comfort him. Suddenly, Arslan confesses that guilt has begun to consume him, and he had acted far too rashly. He should have spoken with the king first. In fact, every time he tries to recall his real father, only the image of the king comes to his mind. He says, "The hatred ran deep, and I should have listened to Bakal when he said to me, search for the truth and do not act until you have proof. Shin replies, everything you said is true. However, the time for regret has passed, my friend. From now on, you must seek out the complete truth and transform the questions in your mind into clear, unquestionable answers. Indeed, they both head toward the gate once again. Arslan says, I must know the king's purpose in opening the gate to the realm of Earth. Shin replies, as long as I am stuck here, I will stay by your side until you uncover the full truth, and until I find a way to return to the Earth realm. At that moment, Lisa calls out to them from below and they descend from the walls. Shin, ever enthusiastic, leaps down with tremendous speed, and as Arslan warns, careful, Shin slips. His fall appears fatal. But, on whom? This is the indomitable Shin. He surprises them all by revealing he was joking and says to Arslan, I beat you again as usual. Meanwhile, Pascal continues investigating and says all the research was functioning properly and the gate was supposed to remain active without failure. What happened is truly strange, and it demands an explanation. Pascal and his assistant continue their search, and they propose a theory. As long as conditions here remain stable, the disaster must have occurred in the other direction, in the Earth realm. Then Lisa and Shin join them. Pascal says, I'm sorry, but I still can't help you return to the Earth realm. Shin replies, I'm sure you'll figure it out, and if you don't, I'm strong enough to find a way myself. But more importantly, we need to help Arslan. He's feeling a bit down after everything that happened, and I think I've got a solution. Shin then goes to Arslan and says, honestly, I'm bored, and I have no choice but to unleash what's inside me on you. Why me? That's just how I felt. He continues, you look quite good when you're depressed, and scared too. I noticed that. Arslan becomes angry and draws his weapon, and a fierce battle erupts between them, strikes from the left and from the right. I am Shin, the uncle of the mighty. It becomes clear that Shin is doing this to pull Arslan out of his mental state and help him think clearly again. The fight continues until both are completely exhausted and unable to move. Shin says, as long as I've found you in my life, I won't leave you until you become a real man. Let's go. He tries to provoke him, and it works. Arslan attacks recklessly, knocking Shin to the ground and making him drop his weapon. You think it ends like this, my friend? No way. Then Arslan strikes again with all his might and slams him to the ground. Yes, this is the real fight. And now Arslan realizes that Shin is only trying to help him, especially after he says, you must stop dwelling on the past and return to yourself once more. There are many who need your help, and that is now your role as a prince. Arslan smiles and replies, all right, my friend. We then shift to Demetro, who has gathered the team to inform them that the kingdom has plunged into corruption and chaos, and that the nobles and corrupt leaders are attacking cities and villages, spreading devastation everywhere. He adds, we must take control of this situation as quickly as possible. At that moment, Louise surprises them all and says, I no longer have a place in this team after what I've done, so I've decided to leave. But Demetro disagrees and says, this is the time we need you most, and if you've made a mistake, then this is the best chance to make it right. Then Louise reconsiders and says, I'll do everything I can to restore stability to the kingdom. At that moment, Shin and Arslan enter, and Arslan's spirits are high once more. He asks Demetro to let him join them in erasing injustice from the kingdom. Suddenly, Demetro laughs and says, you idiot, you've already been part of the team for a while. Then Pascal, his assistant, and Lisa arrive. Pascal informs Shin that they will conclude their investigation here and return to the royal laboratory, hoping to find a way back to the Earth realm. Then Demetro says, we must head back to the capital. On the way, we'll try to reclaim the areas overtaken by corruption. Here, Shin bursts with joy and excitement and says, I'm the leader of our journey back. This is truly great. On the other side, we see a certain noble who has gathered a number of soldiers and begun attacking people and stealing food brutally. He even declares that the village now belongs to him, and its people are his slaves from this day on. Before he can finish his words, a dagger appears beneath his feet. Yes, it's Demetro and the team. They have arrived. This is your darkest day. The soldiers charge, but it's hopeless. They face the rebels. The rebels counterattack and teach them a lesson they will never forget. Suddenly, that wretched noble lunges at Arslan and Shin. Step aside. Next, over there, your grace. The noble flees before suffering the fate of the rest of his men. Later, the village chief gathers with the team and thanks Demetro for standing with them. But when Shin asks if the noble had learned his lesson, the chief replies, no. He looks worried, fearing that the corrupt noble will return the moment the team departs the village. Dimitro urged everyone to hurry and race against time, calling upon the allies for help to restore order amidst the chaos that had swept across the lands. Yet Arslan explained that even if they did so, regaining control of all regions at once would be nearly impossible. He emphasized that the people themselves must take part in reviving hope, for that is the only path to salvation. Suddenly, the village chief interrupted, declaring that none of this would be possible without the presence of a new king. He urged Arslan to proclaim himself king of Andorra, but Arslan ignored his words entirely, as if he hadn't heard them at all. The next day, Arslan suggested to his companions that they go negotiate with the corrupt man who had been attacking the village, hoping to convince him to join their cause and defend it instead of harming it. Dimitro immediately agreed and took with him Ioga, Shin, and Arslan to the man's residence. But something strange happened when they arrived. There was no one there. They entered the mansion and explored a little, until Ioga alerted them that someone was inside one of the rooms. And indeed, the moment they opened the door, they found the man seated, gripped by terror and shouting, "What brought you here?" Arslan responded, "You promised not to oppress the villagers again. You have no right to do so. Someone in your position should help the people, not steal from them." But suddenly, the man grew even more terrified and begged them to save him immediately. And in a flash, he was killed. But why? And how did it happen? There it was. The bait had appeared. He was the one behind it. And it seemed he had been struck by a dreadful curse, turning him into a terrifying demon. Everyone drew their weapons as the bait launched into a frenzied attack. Shin intercepted him, and Dimitro struck again, while Arslan stepped back slightly. But the bait caught him off guard and wounded his shoulder. Suddenly, Arslan's shoulder transformed, releasing a wave of frightening spirits. Arslan and Shin fought with everything they had, but the spirits rose again, surrounding them from every direction. At that moment, the bait seized Dimitro and hurled him through the castle window, smashing him to the ground, nearly killing him. But just then, someone appeared and saved him at the last second. It was the mercenary commander. But why did he save him? We flash back to an earlier scene where we discover that the bait had massacred the mercenary squad in Babylon and even betrayed the commander himself, yet the commander had miraculously survived. A fierce battle erupted between the commander and the bait, with the former gaining the upper hand and delivering a critical blow. In the end, the bait fled before he could be finished off completely. Dimitro thanked the commander, whose name was Kor, but Kor replied coldly, "I didn't do this for you. I only want to destroy the bait." Still, Dimitro invited him to join their team. Kor hesitated briefly, then agreed on one condition. "Once I'm done with the bait, I'm leaving." Meanwhile, we shift to Dimitrov, the extermination commander, who was meeting with one of his aides to ask for help, as a corrupt noble was attacking their island with a fleet of advanced ships and weaponry. At that moment, the team led by Pascal arrived to inform Dimitrov of what they had discovered. He explained that the gateway connecting Andorra to Earth wasn't just one, it was two, one in Babylon and the other on Earth's side. So activating the Babylon gate alone would not work. In fact, it could have disastrous side effects, just like what had happened to the bait. The only solution was to open both gates from both sides. He then turned to Shin and said, "We will find a way to bring you back." Moreover, the energy that sustained life in Andorra was rapidly depleting, and if no definitive solution was found, it could cause the collapse of the entire world. Elsewhere, a confrontation was brewing between Felix and Misha on one side, and Kor and Louise on the other. Louise tried to calm things down, but Misha recklessly launched into an attack. Suddenly, a spear pierced through the scene. It was Jared, the leader of the Badoon, stepping in to de-escalate the situation. He said, "I know these two were once criminals, but they are still part of us. I promise, anyone who dares lay a hand on them, I'll take them down myself." And indeed, he succeeded in restoring calm. In another location, war broke out at the edges of the island. A noble threatened the residents, saying, "Surrender or you'll be eliminated one by one." But the reply was fierce and unwavering. "Stand your ground and know who you're speaking to. Your doom has arrived, wretch." The battle began, and the enemy fleet was obliterated in a stunning display of force. After the fight, the team regrouped. Dimitro asked Jarad to help secure the northern territories, while the rest of the group headed toward the capital to reclaim the regions that opposed them. Later, Arslan took both Dimitro and Shin aside, telling them that sending the Badoon alone to pacify the north would be a failure. People still feared them, thinking they were savage beasts. That's why they needed a mixed team of humans and Badoon. Here, Shin teased him, saying, "First time I've seen a human with the brain of a dog speak wisely." Arslan playfully grabbed him, threatening him for the joke. We then moved to the girls who were sitting together. Suddenly, Licia said, "I wish I could do something to save Andorra from ruin." Louise replied teasingly, "Simple. Marry Arslan instead of staying a spinster." They burst into laughter, while Licia blushed deeply, her face turning red. That night, Pascal was sitting with his assistant when Arslan entered and asked whether he had found anything about his origins. Pascal replied, "While searching in the lab, I found old records. I discovered that your real father's name was Arzam, the former king, before Lausanne seized the throne. The shocking part is that Arzam and Lausanne were once allies. Together, they conquered the northern continent, and they were the first to discover the Babylon Gate." That was all the information they had uncovered so far. There were still many ancient records left in the lab, and Pascal promised to continue the search to uncover the full truth. The next day, the team split into two groups as planned. Radio and his team headed north, while Dimitro and the others marched directly toward the capital. Before long, they reached the royal castle. As they stood at the gate, servants ran to greet them, followed by the captain of the guard and the soldiers, none of whom could believe Arslan was still alive. The prince's return filled them with joy. The captain asked about the people accompanying him. Arslan responded, "They are my friends. There's no need for concern." The group entered the castle, and the servants informed him that more than half the soldiers had abandoned their posts after the king's death. Dimitro commented, "I'm sure they've turned into bandits and mercenaries. That's why the kingdom fell into chaos." Suddenly they heard a loud noise from outside. They rushed out to find the royal guards confronting Felix and Misha on the brink of battle. The captain ordered them not to wander the palace and remain suspicious. But Arslan told him to lower his weapon. "I know you're doing this to protect me, but they are my friends, not enemies. None of this is necessary." The guards obeyed immediately. Shin, grinning, said, "You really are a true prince. Everyone listens to your word." Afterwards, Arslan wandered alone through the castle and entered the king's chamber. He took his father's dagger, then approached the royal throne, lost in thought. Dimitro called to him, saying, "That chair is no different from any other. The throne means nothing. It's the one who sits upon it that matters. Always remember, as long as this throne remains empty, the kingdom will stay in chaos." Then he walked away. We shift to another scene where the minister was speaking with Gradio. He remarked that Dimitro was a genius, and he never expected humans and Badoon to stand united. Suddenly, he sensed something strange approaching the forest. A ghost army was drawing near the castle. No doubt, the bait had sent them. The news spread quickly. The captain gathered the troops preparing for battle, but morale was dangerously low. Everyone muttered, "This is the end." That's when the team appeared. Dimitro stepped forward and said, "Step aside and enjoy the show. Even Arslan himself is ready to fight." The captain tried to stop him, fearing for his life, but Arslan insisted. He took Shin and the others with him to face the spirits. An intense battle erupted, with the team striking down the ghosts one by one, but they kept rising in number. Suddenly, a ghost ambushed Misha, nearly killing her. But at the last moment, Kor intervened and saved her. For the first time, Misha thanked someone, and there, observing the battle, stood the bait, now fully transformed into a demon, blinded by vengeance and destruction. After a few moments, there was no sign of Arslan. Suddenly, the storm swept over everyone with reckless fury. Shin began to take blow after blow, as though it were the end of everything. From within the house, a massive number of spirits erupted. Spirits with no purpose other than to eliminate the prince. They charged violently, and no one could stand against them. Kor intervened in the battle, but the house grew even more besieged, and the spirits multiplied rapidly. "You think this is the end?" "No, not yet." Suddenly, the royal guard appeared, entering the battlefield with courage. They provided full support, striking down the spirits one after another. Then came a majestic moment. A grand battle uniting the royal guard, the rebels, and the stateless, all fighting on the same side. Yes, this was the long-awaited scene in its entirety. The house continued to fight against Shin, but Dimitro struck it in the leg with a dagger, distracting it. Arslan then pounced and landed a powerful blow to its eye, leaving behind an unforgettable mark. And once again, greatness revealed itself. As expected, the house fled before it could be destroyed completely. Everyone present rejoiced at the glorious victory, and joy filled the air. Elsewhere, we shift to Pascal, who was in the royal laboratory with his assistant. He was stunned to see research scattered everywhere and remarked, This must be what happened after the king left the castle. Suddenly a voice called out from behind him. Yes, it was Roni, Pascal's friend and the overseer of the laboratory's research. Overjoyed to see Pascal had returned at last, the two reunited and began investigating the cause behind the depletion of life energy in the kingdom of Andorra, which now stood on the brink of collapse. Later, we see the entire team gathered in the castle. There, Kor declared that he must pursue the house and eliminate it once and for all. Yet he realized that the house had now become a murderous beast, and he could not face it alone. At that moment, Louis joined him, followed by Demetro, who sent Felix and Misha to accompany them. Suddenly, Arslan said, additional support must be sent, and dispatched a group of royal guards with them. During their journey, they noticed something deeply alarming. Yes, the farmlands were beginning to lose all life due to the loss of Andorra's vital energy. When the news reached Demetro and the rest of the team, he warned them, saying, if the people sense there is no solution to this catastrophe, the kingdom will plunge into endless chaos. He added, we must aid the people, provide food, and reassure them, until Pascal and his assistant find a solution to this crisis. Sometime later, Arslan took Shin to a secluded place to speak with him about something important. He brought him down to the castle's prison, where Shin realized it was the same place he had first appeared. Arslan told him, try shouting, or doing anything. Perhaps you'll return to your world again. But Shin ignored him, ascended a strange staircase, and asked, what is this pit? Arslan replied, focus with me here. Suddenly Shin lost his temper and shouted, what exactly are you thinking? Forget about me and think of the kingdom that is on the verge of destruction. You're a worthless prince. Arslan grew furious and lunged at him, but Shin dodged the attack, and boom, the ground collapsed beneath him and he fell into the pit. Arslan tried to follow and fell as well. It seemed to be the end for both of them. But Arslan used his weapon to cling to the pit's walls, while Shin spotted a strange ladder and leaped toward it. Arslan followed. With no way back up, they decided to continue descending. Arslan admitted he had no knowledge of this place. As they went further down, complete darkness surrounded them. There was no visibility. Suddenly a voice behind them asked, who are you? What are you doing here? They turned swiftly and asked, are you human or jinn? What's your story exactly? Arslan approached and discovered a chained prisoner seated on the ground. One of the Adon. His name was Freem. Arslan asked him about his identity, and Freem replied, we were servants in the royal castle, and somehow we ended up here. Arslan asked, and who imprisoned you in this place? Freem responded, King Ram. Yes, the real Arslan. And so the story began to unravel. We now learn that Freem was the commander of the kingdom's special forces and the king's right hand, carrying out every command without question. But due to a single mistake, the king decided to imprison him here. Yet Freem still loved the king. He held no anger toward what happened, for King Ram had always performed his duties with devotion until he changed completely because of an outsider. Now we flash back to an earlier time. We see King Zarin and his brother Lazan discover a body near the castle. By sheer chance, it turned out the man was alive. Freem said, it was clear he wasn't from our world. He must have come from Earth. The king brought him to the castle and welcomed him warmly. We learn that this man was a brilliant scientist, a remarkable researcher, and the king was truly impressed by him. He even possessed the ability to travel between Andorra and Earth with astonishing ease. One day the man told the king, although Andorra is full of energy, the Earth is rich in technology, planes that transport people, phones for communication, devastating weapons, and unmatched powers. The next day, he gifted the king a firearm. The king knew nothing about it. Suddenly, the scientist fired at a vase, shattering it. The king and Freem stood stunned. Then, the man presented a project, merging Earth's technology with Andorra's vital energy. The king was so mesmerized by the idea that he expelled all scientists and researchers from the palace. When Zarin tried to stop him, the king screamed at him. One day, the scientist expressed admiration for the weapon used by the Zaraib, as it was composed of Andorra's life energy and the physical capabilities of its people. At that point, the king lost all vision, figuratively and literally, and took the idea to heart. Then the scientist proposed the construction of a city called Babylon to bridge the two worlds, promising the king his name would be immortalized in history, as he would bring Earth's technology into Andorra. Zarin warned him, if you do this, you will destroy the kingdom. But the king yelled at him once again. When things reached their peak, Freem confronted the scientist and said, I'm certain you're lying to the king. There's a hidden evil you're preparing. The man laughed and said, you're far too clever, and that threatens my plan. Freem drew his weapon and said, "Surrender, or I'll end your life and expose your truth." But the man stepped toward him confidently, then suddenly screamed and wounded himself, calling the guards. He convinced the king that Freem had betrayed him. The king punished him, not with a minor sentence, but by deciding to end his life entirely. They bound him, beat him, and cast him into the pit of doom. Since then, Freem had been imprisoned there. Arslan asked him, "And what did that scientist do with the vital energy?" Freem replied, "I don't know what happened after that." Shin asked for the scientist's name, and Freem tried to recall, but he couldn't. Then Shin said, "Since that man could travel between Andorra and Earth, there must be a way back for me to return to my world again." No sooner had Freem sensed the scent of Earth than he erupted in rage, swiftly breaking free and drawing his weapon before launching a reckless attack toward Shin. "Do you think this is the end?" Absolutely not. Suddenly, a magical stone emerged from within Shin's body, releasing a tremendous surge of energy that engulfed the entire place. In an instant, both Shin and Arslan were transported to the world of Earth. The two stood frozen in disbelief, neither of them understanding what had just occurred. Yes, Arslan stood stunned, while Shin was overwhelmed with joy, realizing at last that they had returned to Earth. Shin then took Arslan with him and headed to his home. The doorbell rang, and the moment the door opened and his mother saw him, she embraced him tightly and burst into tears. Only then did he realize how worried she had been, not knowing where he had disappeared to. At that moment, Shin introduced her to Arslan and said, "He is the one who helped me more than anyone else so I could return here." "Yes, you heard that right." But his mother replied, confused, that she understood nothing of what he was saying. Suddenly, Shin told her that he had been in another world, specifically in the kingdom of Andorra, and that Arslan was a native of that kingdom, even its prince. She replied, "Hold on, I don't understand anything at all." She then led them inside, and Shin began recounting the entire story to her in detail. Yet he said, "I thought you wouldn't believe a word of what I'm about to say, but still, you don't seem surprised." His mother, an archaeologist, responded that despite her shock, she was trying to contain her emotions. Moreover, she had read many stories about the existence of another world, and many people believed such things, she and his father among them. Then Shin told her that he needed to go to his father at the lab to make sure he was safe. In the meantime, she prepared a meal to celebrate their return. Shin felt immense happiness. Finally, it was time to eat real food from Earth again. After all the frogs and mysterious things he had eaten in Andorra, whose nature only God knows, Arslan too was astonished and mesmerized by the sight of the food. Once they finished eating, Shin began recounting everything that had happened to him in Andorra in full detail. Suddenly, Arslan's eyes caught sight of a photo hanging in Beirut, and he asked Shin, "What is this?" To which Shin replied that it was a photo, a technology from the world of Earth. Then the mother showed Arslan another photo, one of Shin as a child. At that moment, Arslan appeared shocked, as though he had noticed something strange. They all went to rest for a while, and Shin told Arslan that they would go to his father in the morning. Since he was a scientific researcher, he would certainly be able to help him return to his world. Indeed, the next day, Shin took Arslan on a short tour, spending a wonderful day together, introducing him to the world of Earth. Arslan remained captivated by everything he saw. They then headed to the lab, where they met Sanga, Shin's father. The moment Sanga saw his son, he rushed to him joyfully, relieved to see him safe and sound. Then Shin introduced Arslan to his father, and told him that he had come with him from Andorra. As always, his father showed no sign of surprise. Instead, he said, "I knew you were there." But what exactly did he mean by that? They sat down together, and Shin began recounting everything that had happened to him, asking his father to help Arslan return to Andorra. Sanga responded that the crystal which had transported them had been discovered by his mother, and it most likely contained massive energy, even the power of instantaneous travel. He then reassured him, "Don't worry, I'll definitely find a way." Shin then hurried his father, telling him that Arslan was the son of Andorra's former king, and that his uncle Dels had killed his father and seized the throne. But Dels himself was later killed, and Andorra had since plunged into utter chaos. Sanga calmed them down and promised that Arslan would return to Andorra as soon as possible. Suddenly, Arslan drifted off, as if remembering something. He froze in place, and then all his memories came flooding back. A vision flashed in his mind, a memory of Shin as a child. Yes, bearing the seal of the kingdom of Andorra. What is the truth behind this? I'm not mistaken. All at once, Arslan rushed back toward the lab heading straight to Sanga and said, "You didn't believe our story because of some tales about another world, but because you were actually there yourself." Shin tried to calm him down, but Arslan had already remembered everything. Yes, he had recalled the image of the world that once appeared to them long ago. Suddenly Sanga shot him, and it seems this is the end. Shin stood in utter shock. He could no longer understand anything. Suddenly, Sanga declared that he would kill Arslan, just as he himself had been stripped of everything. Yes, Sanga was the one who killed King Zaram. Arslan was enraged and tried to summon his weapon, but he failed. Sanga mockingly said to him, "Do you think you're in Andorra or what?" Then he called out to Shin, telling him to come closer. But Arslan stopped him and revealed a shocking truth. Shin was not his son. Shin was the son of Delzal. But why? And how? In that very moment, Arslan stabbed Sanga with a dagger, took Shin, and fled the place. Disappointment and heartbreak filling the entire atmosphere. Shin could no longer move, so we returned to a flashback to discover the story from the beginning. We had known that Sanga was once a simple scientist, awaiting the birth of his child. But sadly, his son died at birth. He was consumed by grief. Then, by coincidence, he found a way to travel to the world of Andorra, where he met the king. Upon learning of the presence of an energy source there, he changed. He became greedy, his heart overwhelmed with desire. He began plotting to exploit that energy to amass a vast fortune. Now, since Andorra was a kingdom devoid of any technology, the king was astonished when he saw a lighter. Yes, just as you heard, my friend. At that moment, the king told Sanga that Delzal had a sick son, one no one could cure, and offered to entrust him to Sanga, hoping that Earth's technology might succeed in healing him. Indeed, Sanga assured him that the field of medicine on Earth was highly advanced, and that surely they would find a treatment for his condition. Delzal hesitated at first, but he had no other choice to save his son. He went to bid him farewell, and handed him over to Sanga. Sanga took the child to Earth, where he was treated successfully. Sanga then gave him a home, and as time passed, the boy began to grow attached to him. And by the way, that child was Shin, my friend. Later on, Sanga convinced the king to build the city of Babylon and to open the dimensional gate using the energy source, thus allowing access to the surface at any time and enabling Earth's technology to flow into the kingdom. He told him that such a feat might immortalize his name in history. The king was greatly impressed by the idea and headed to Babylon. But there, he discovered Sanga's betrayal. He had done it all for the life energy. The king tried to stop him, but Sanga shot him and killed him. When Delzal arrived, he found his brother taking his final breaths. He begged him to return his son, but Sanga replied, "Come and take him, if you can." Then he disappeared, forever. After that, Arslan returned home and decided to confront his mother with the truth. At that moment, she told him that after what Sanga had done, there was no longer any way to return to Andorra. That's why she had taken care of him, raised him as her own son. Suddenly, she handed him the royal seal and revealed that they were actually cousins by blood. They entered the room to rest a little. As Shin lay down, memories began to attack him. He remembered his true father dying before his eyes, while he could do nothing. Then suddenly, Arslan said to him, "Now I finally understand why Delzal was so insistent on rebuilding the city of Babylon. Yes, he wanted to reach you, Shin. You were his only goal all these years." After learning the truth, Shin sank into a state of depression. He refused to eat or drink. Arslan tried to help him, but it was no use. At that point, Arslan decided to go to Sanga himself and try to speak with him. He made his way to the laboratory, but the guards blocked his path. When Sanga saw him, he took him to his office and pointed a gun at him, saying, "If you try to drug me, I'll blow your head off." Arslan calmly replied, "I'm only here to ask you something. I'll leave right after." He asked him, "Do you truly love Shin? Do you see him as your son?" Sanga responded, "Even if he's not of my blood, I'm the one most worthy of him. I'm the one who raised him, the one who taught him. I consider him my son. More than that, all I want is for us to be a family again, just like before." Arslan realized that Sanga didn't intend to harm him or Shin as long as they stayed out of his way. In fact, he might even help them return to Andorra someday. He went back to Shin and told him that he had been to see Sanga at the lab. He told him everything that had happened and said, "You must talk to him. don't make the same mistake I did. I should have spoken to Delzal before making my decision. And you, Shin, you must forget about Andorra entirely and go speak to Sanga. After that, you're free to decide as you wish." At that moment, Shin thanked Arslan and told him that he truly would go and talk to Sanga. Meanwhile, the team was still out there, searching for Shin and Arslan. Suddenly, Alicia rushes to Dimitro, accompanied by one of the soldiers, informing him that a guard had seen them walking together toward the castle's prison. She explains that this prison was the very first place Shin appeared. At that, Grotto heads inside to inspect the prison, and afterwards, they gather to hold a meeting. Then, Bakal appears and informs them that he has discovered a way to travel between Andorra and Earth. Everyone is stunned, their faces filled with shock. Bakal begins to explain, revealing that in ancient archaeological records, he found references to crystals of incredible power, called barren blue, crystals that once allowed seamless travel between both worlds. However, one day, that power was utterly shattered. And yet, if anyone were to come across even a fragment of it, it would respond and activate once more. These crystals only react to heartbeats and intense emotions such as rage, fear, or even curiosity. Yes, this explains Shin's presence here. The energy must have been dormant within him, which allowed him to cross into this world. And by the same logic, there must be a reason why they are now on Earth. Pascal speaks up. "No more talking, let's begin the search." We return to Shin, who stands beside Arslan, awaiting Sanga outside one of his old laboratories. Specifically, the very first lab he ever worked in. Just then, Sanga arrives and turns to Arslan, asking, "What are you doing here?" Arslan replies that he won't be a bother and has come only to listen, not to interfere. Shin then steps forward, addressing Sanga. "Even though you killed Zaram's family and caused immense suffering to many in Andorra, I still can't bring myself to hate you. But why did you do it?" At that moment, Sanga pulls a crystal out from his body. Yes, it's barren blue, just as Pascal had described. He tells Shin that this is the stone that traveled between Andorra and Earth, and in that moment, Shin realizes that a similar stone lies within him as well. That's what enabled him to move between both worlds. Sanga continues, explaining that Andorra contains a terrifying energy source, and that he has used this energy to reshape Earth entirely. It has now become the primary source of all existing technology. Shin shouts in fury, "You're about to destroy an entire world just for your own benefit." Sanga replies coldly, "Let it be destroyed or even burn. Everything in this world comes with gains and losses, and where was I supposed to get the money to treat you? You were the first to benefit from this energy." When Shin realizes that Sanga is the reason the energy is diminishing, he demands that he stop immediately. But Sanga has a different view, saying, "Andorra gave us little and is already ruined. Join me, and together we'll shape Earth's future. Besides, I'm on the verge of discovering a way to restore Earth's energy after Andorra's collapse." Shin replies with seething rage, "You can't possibly be human. You're absolutely insane." Furious, Sanga draws his pistol and points it at Shin. "If you won't help me, then don't stand in my way." At the last moment, Arslan lunges at Sanga and manages to teleport Shin away, but Sanga shoots Arslan, sending him crashing to the ground, seemingly about to finish him off. But do you really think this is the end? Of course not. The barren blue energy suddenly activates and teleports them all away. We are then thrust into a fierce battle as the team faces off against Albeit. Yes, they've found him, and they've sworn not to return until he is utterly destroyed. Albeit charges in recklessly, but then a strange energy surges among them, and suddenly, Shin and Arslan are dropped right in front of Albeit himself. What terrible luck, my friend. The team is stunned. No one understands what just happened. Albeit smirks and says mockingly, "Welcome back." He launches another wild attack, but the team swiftly evades. Shin sarcastically mutters, "Arslan, Andorra is vast and endless. Yet fate insists on bringing us here. I swear, may we just die and be free of this cursed luck. I've had enough." Then they draw their weapons, and a brutal battle begins between the team and Albeit. The group faces off against the specters one by one, while Shin and Arslan continue their fight against Albeit. Suddenly, in the middle of the clash, they pause and talk again about Baron Blue, wondering, can Shin use that power once more? Albeit snaps and shouts, "Enough talking, come die already." Shin retorts, "Can't you see we're discussing something critical? Shut up until we're done, will you?" They really shouldn't have said that, because Albeit grows even more furious and unleashes a massive wave of specters, attacking them with his full might. but suddenly someone intervenes and blocks the attack in a flash. Yet a demonic hand bursts out of Albiet's body and sinks its claws into Core. It looks like he's about to die. At that moment, Arslan and Shin charge toward Albiet with full speed, striking him hard and rescuing Core from death. Then, without warning, Albiet begins to scream, showing signs of intense agony. It becomes clear that the forces of evil have fully gathered within him. He transforms into a terrifying and savage monster, more fearsome than ever before. The team is paralyzed in shock. No one knows what to do. Albiet has changed completely, and no one can match his strength anymore. Core exclaims, "Albiet was already terrifying when he was normal. What about now that he's lost his mind and turned into this? We're done for." Albiet then lunges at Misha, but Lewis jumps in just in time and barely manages to save her. Enraged, Misha launches her own attack, but quickly realizes she's up against the Demon King himself. Albiet strikes Misha with brutal force, and in a desperate act, Felix sacrifices himself to pull her away at the last second. He is completely destroyed. It seems to be his end. Misha, burning with fury, charges once more to avenge him, but she's about to take a fatal blow until Lewis sacrifices herself too, saving her again. The team falls one by one. No one can hold out. At that moment, they decide to retreat toward the castle, quickly, before they're all wiped out. Meanwhile, on the other side, Yuga attempts to use his connection with Andorra to discover the reason behind the energy drain, but he collapses instantly. At the same moment, Pascal locates the exact spot, right in the middle of the ocean. Yes, that is the source of the energy drop. Pascal begins to suspect that a device for energy extraction is hidden there, and that it might be the root of all this disaster. At that time, Shin and Arslan arrive, and the team rejoices to see them again, especially when Shin tells them they had been in the world of Earth. He confirms the suspicion about the energy extraction device. When the assistant asks how he's so sure, Shin replies, "Simple. The one who built that device is my father." They also learn the truth about Shin. He is actually the son of Delzal, the former king who had died. Sometime later, we see the group digging trenches around the castle, preparing for the battle against Albiet. Meanwhile, Lesia orders Villaron to transform. We learn that they've divided the mission among themselves. Arslan, Shin, and Pascal will head to the energy drop zone, while the rest of the team will face Albiet directly. And indeed, Albiet appears in the distance, within clear sight. But to whom? We are the rebels. The entire area explodes upon Albiet's arrival. They had set a perfect trap. Earth's father appears in a grand heroic moment. Meanwhile, Sinan and Shin rush toward the energy source. But suddenly, we see Albiet seizing Villaron mid-air. It seems the end has come. Villaron falls off the dragon and crashes onto Albiet. He looks around and says, "There's no way out now. I've reached my end." Then with firm resolve, "I believe in you all. I know you'll save Andorra." He pulls out an energy bomb from his gear, ignites it within Albiet, and sets the dragon ablaze. Yes, Pascal has sacrificed himself to save the kingdom. Everyone stands frozen, unable to grasp what just happened. Dimitro commands his assistant to search for Pascal, since they had seen him fall into the forest. As for the others, they decide to destroy the monster no matter the cost. The assistant hands him a grenade, explaining that it's highly explosive and was crafted by Pascal especially for this very moment. The assistant then heads off to find Pascal. Suddenly, Core grabs the grenade from Dimitro and says, "No one's ending this beast but me. I've got an old score to settle, and it ends today." Albiet attacks the team once more. A horrifying battle erupts. His power is limitless, and he can regenerate himself entirely. He lunges at Misha again, but Dimitro saves her at the last moment. Things spiral out of control. It truly looks like the end. But then, Dimitro reveals his plan. He'll distract the monster while Core sneaks in and blows up its core. Radio contacts Core and tells him, "There won't be another chance. You must succeed, no matter the cost." And so they charge, striking him repeatedly, but their hits don't seem to land. Then, at the perfect moment, Core dashes forward at full speed and manages to strike the very center of Albiet's energy. An incredible move. But suddenly, Albiet counters, grabs Core, and begins to crush him. Still, with unmatched bravery, Core sacrifices himself, activating the bomb within, obliterating Albiet completely and ending him once and for all. As for Shin and Arslan, they had finally arrived at the energy drop core, a colossal tower rising from the center of the waters. They were both stunned by its immense size. Flare flew them to the top, carrying them safely to the roof of the structure. But What was this place exactly? It looked like something straight out of a fantasy world, as if the building had descended from space rather than risen from the earth. They then made their way to the energy crystal, which was absolutely massive. Each of them summoned their weapon and began striking at the crystal, trying to shatter it, but it was useless. The crystal was tougher than any shield a person could ever imagine. That's when Shin stopped his attacks and, relying on his intellect, told Arslan that this was known as a core fracture. Every crystal had a weak point, and that's where it must be struck. I don't get it, Arslan said. Shin replied, it's simple. Just hold the weapon vertically. Boom, he broke it. My friend, it was an absolutely stunning moment. Arslan followed, delivering a strike of his own and smashing the crystal as well. Then Shin said to Arslan, promise me, when we return, you will declare yourself king of Andorra. Believe me, this is the right time. Andorra without a king will be destroyed once again. Arslan hesitated, but Shin reassured him, I'm with you. Suddenly, they were struck by a terrifying attack. Yes, Sanga himself had arrived. I will destroy you, you little insects, he shouted. You really think you can bring down everything I've built? He then turned to Shin and said, even now, I can still forgive you. Join me, and together we'll crush that boy beside you. But Shin stood firm and answered, you're no longer human. Hatred and arrogance have blinded your heart. I won't let you hurt anyone else, not while I still breathe. Sanga replied, so be it. Suddenly, gigantic weapons erupted from his back. It was clear that the end was near. But wait, how was he able to reveal such weapons if he didn't even belong to Andorra? Yes, this criminal, after killing the Zaramka, had merely been warming up until now. He lunged at Shin, injuring him, then grabbed Arslan and slammed him to the ground. You're weak and stupid just like the Zaram, he growled. You'll never defeat me. But Arslan rose, furious. Fine! His weapon began to evolve, reaching its ultimate form. What was happening? Arslan declared. If I once fought for the Zaram, I now fight for everyone who suffered because of you. I will show no mercy. Shin, filled with resolve, shouted. That's what I'm talking about. Sanga, enraged, charged at them, but he froze in the air. By whom? Arslan unleashed the Ember Dragon and with a single strike shattered Sanga's weapon and burned himself in the process. He launched another attack, and though Sanga tried to defend himself, it was already too late. Arslan's weapon evolved further and further. The scene was beyond belief. Still, Sanga was not defeated so easily. He retaliated violently, managing to strike Shin and completely take him down. He approached him and said, this is your end. He bound Shin, suspending him in the air. It was clear, the end was near. Sanga launched a final blow. Shin didn't flinch. He faced death with unwavering courage. Give it everything you've got, he shouted. But do you really think this is the end, my friend? Not at all. Arslan's weapon evolved once more, and he charged in, with Phylon joining the attack. Boom! In the blink of an eye, they obliterated Sanga. Shin, watching it unfold, was overcome with memories of the past, a deep sorrow weighing on him. Suddenly, the crystal was destroyed. The entire place began to collapse. It seemed their end was upon them as well. Shin clung to a rock, barely holding on. He tried to activate the Baron Blue to escape, but he didn't know how to operate it, and tragically, both of them fell from above. But wait, whoosh! Floron had returned to life, and with divine judgment, he saved them from death at the very last moment. From the other side, Bilal, the assistant, managed to reach Pascal. It turned out he wasn't dead as everyone had assumed. Instead, he was hanging between the trees, having survived thanks to his explosion-resistant suit and another luxurious feature we'll learn about later. After a short while, we find Dimitro and the team gathered, when suddenly Shin and Arslan arrive. The atmosphere turns jubilant when everyone realizes that Pascal is still alive. Then, we see Dimitro, Shin, and Arslan standing together. At that moment, Arslan thanks Dimitro for everything he has done for him. Soon after, Shah joins them as well. When Arslan turns to her, he thanks her for all she's done and says, I'm sorry if I made you worry about me. The girl is deeply moved by his words and bursts into tears. Arslan, confused, doesn't understand why she's crying. Shin turns to him and says, of course an idiot like you would ask something like that. The girl loves you, you fool. Let's leave that moment aside. After that, everyone takes a bit of rest, and joy spreads as Andorra is returned to them once again. Everything seems absolutely perfect. But suddenly, Shin steps outside, and Arslan follows him. There, Shin tells him that he has to return to planet Earth. Even though this may be his true homeland, His mother is surely waiting for him, and she has no one else but him now. So, he must go back to her. The boy bids Arslan farewell and says, "All right then, take care of yourself. I'm sure we'll meet again someday." Then he walks away and returns to Earth once more. And with that, the first season of the anime comes to an end. If you enjoyed the story and want to see season 2, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to support us with a like, subscribe to the channel for more recaps, and hit the bell icon so you'll be the first to see them as soon as they drop. See you next time.